Many believe they fail because they don't have luck, because the world is against them, or because it simply wasn't meant for them. But the truth is, failure isn't born in results. It's born in the morning, in the first thing you think about when you wake up, in the way you start your day. Because every morning, unknowingly, you're building your destiny. And if that beginning is filled with chaos, distraction, doubt, or disorder, then you're repeating the pattern that leads you to the same mistakes again and again. I, Brian Tracy, learned that success is not an isolated event. It's a direct consequence of what you do and don't do when you start your day. If you're tired of failing, you don't need to wait for a miraculous opportunity. You need to train your morning. Because when you control your first decisions, you control your direction. And when you control your direction, success stops being a fantasy and becomes a daily strategy. Failure usually doesn't shout. It doesn't arrive suddenly or appear one day with a label that says, "This is what's holding you back." No. Failure creeps into the small things. It settles in the first few minutes of the day, in the decision to hit snooze for 5 more minutes, in the habit of checking messages before checking goals, in the silent thought of today won't be any different. It starts there, in that first invisible battle that most people lose before even getting out of bed. Because what determines if you'll have a productive, focused, and intentional day isn't what you do at 3 p.m. It's what you do in the first 30 minutes after opening your eyes. If you start the day from reaction, from confusion, from laziness, then you're entering life at a disadvantage. The world doesn't wait for you to focus. The world rewards those who are already in motion when others are still waking up. And here's the truth that very few want to accept. Success isn't built with sporadic big decisions, but with repeated micro decisions every single day. The way you get up, how you talk to yourself, what thoughts you allow, what priority you give to your goals, that either forms you or destroys you. It's not about waking up at 5 a.m. because it's trendy or following a stolen routine from the internet. It's about having clarity of who you are, what you want, and what you're willing to do to get there. And that clarity is only activated when you direct your mind in the morning, not when you let it wander. You can't expect different results if every morning you start by improvising, if every morning you begin with noise, without structure, without purpose, because the day isn't formed by the clock, it's formed by your intention. The morning is the training ground for your character. It's where you decide if today will be just another day or the first day of a new life. Every time you open your eyes and let yourself be dragged by impulse, the impulse to sleep more, to avoid discomfort, to think about what you lack, you're reinforcing an identity that keeps you where you don't want to be. But when you decide that your morning will be sacred, that your first hour will be untouchable, that this moment doesn't belong to the world but to you, then something changes. You feel it, it's noticeable, and that change accumulates. Because a good morning doesn't guarantee a good day, but it prepares you to face it with more strength, more clarity, more intention. And that, sustained every day, transforms everything. Because life doesn't change when the big opportunity arrives. It changes when you stop wasting the small ones, especially the one you have every morning. Every morning that starts with haste, with chaos, with distraction, is a morning that pulls you away from your best self. But you don't notice it, because morning failure has no immediate consequences. There's no alarm that sounds when you decide to postpone what's important. There's no visible punishment when you surrender to autopilot. There's only a slight discouragement, a lack of energy, a feeling of always reaching for something that never arrives. And over time, that feeling turns into an identity. You tell yourself, I'm not consistent. I always lack something. I'm not like others. But what you're actually lacking isn't motivation. It's structure. It's focus. It's a firm decision to never again give your mornings away to disorder. Because he who doesn't master his beginning ends up being dragged by the rest of the day. You don't fail because of what you do in big moments. You fail because of what you don't do when no one is watching, for not getting up when you promised, for not writing what you want to achieve, for not visualizing who you want to be, for not training your mind instead of feeding the complaint. Every morning is a blank page that you can fill with habits that strengthen you or with habits that wear you down. And the most dangerous thing isn't having a messy morning once, it's having it every day and thinking it's normal. Because what you repeat without awareness becomes destiny. And if every dawn is just as lukewarm, just as dispersed, just as weak, how do you expect your life to be firm, clear, and strong? You have to design your mornings as if you were designing your future, because in fact, that's what you're doing. What you do in that first hour after waking sends a message to your brain. Either you're here to master the day or to survive it, and the brain responds accordingly. If you start with order, with intention, with direction, then everything else aligns. Emotions are more stable. Decisions are firmer. Motivation stops depending on external impulses and begins to spring from your identity. But if you start by reacting to messages, to networks, to thoughts of scarcity, then chaos takes over your mind before you can decide anything, and another day slips through your hands. Do this. Get up without negotiating with laziness. Drink water as the first act of respect for your body. Sit in silence, even if only for 5 minutes, and ask yourself, what do I need today to be proud of myself tonight? not what the world needs or your job or your environment. You then write down 3 things: an action that brings you closer to your goal, an attitude you want to maintain, and a thought you will not allow today. That's structure. That's direction. And it doesn't take more than 15 minutes. But those 15 minutes are worth more than an entire day without consciousness, because it's not about doing a lot. It's about doing what matters at the beginning, where everything starts, where it's defined whether your day will be another repetition or a silent declaration that you're changing this time for real. Many believe they fail because they don't have luck, because they lack time, or because they haven't found their moment. But the truth is much cruder and simpler. They fail because they haven't learned to be consistent when enthusiasm disappears. Because anyone can have a burst of motivation on a Monday, but very few know how to keep it up on Thursday, when the body feels heavy, when the mind doubts, when the noise of the world demands immediate attention. And that's where those who advance separate from those who repeat themselves, not in the intensity of their beginnings, but in the solidity of their continuity. Because no matter how many times you've tried, if you haven't managed to maintain action with or without desire, with or without results, then you'll remain trapped in the same cycle. Start, get excited, get distracted, give up, and that pattern is broken every morning, not with brute force, but with precise focus. A disciplined mind knows that the true enemy is not external failure, but internal disconnection, that feeling of living each day as if it were an accident, as if you couldn't choose how you want to feel, how you want to act, how you want to respond. And that's false. You can choose. You can choose what thoughts to feed, what habits to sustain, what excuses to deactivate. But you can't choose if there's no awareness. And awareness only appears when you stop, breathe, and direct your mind before the world fills it with noise. What are you feeding your mind every morning? What thoughts are looping before you even get out of bed? Because if you start the day with guilt, with complaint, with comparison, you're digging a trench in your own ground. And the worst part is you don't even realize it. You call it routine, but in reality, it's slow self-destruction. He who doesn't take control of his first thought has already lost half the day. Because thought guides emotion, emotion guides action, and action creates the result. If your first thought is, I don't want to get up, today will be heavy, same old, then everything that follows is infected with that energy. But if your first thought is chosen, not imposed, then you regain power. If you decide to start the day with direction, then the rest of the day has a backbone. It won't be perfect, it won't be easy, but it will have structure. And that structure is what sustains you when emotion isn't enough. Take control with something as simple as getting up at the time you promised, not out of obligation, but out of self-respect. Then breathe. Write what you want to achieve and visualize, even if only for 2 minutes, the version of yourself who has already achieved it. See how that version acts, how it walks, how it talks to itself. That version isn't a fantasy, it's a possibility. But you can only reach it if your current version begins to make decisions aligned with it. And all of that, absolutely everything, begins in the morning, where the vision is sown, where the focus is calibrated, where the tone of the day is chosen. If you don't master that moment, others will master you. But if you conquer it, then everything else starts to respond, because the world obeys those who already command themselves. And the best training for that begins right when you open your eyes. The most common mistake of those who constantly fail isn't that they don't try, but that they start the day without direction, without a real commitment to themselves. Getting up early means nothing if you do it without purpose. Drinking coffee and sitting in front of a screen has no weight if there's no intention behind it. You can spend the entire day busy and end up just as empty, because busyness is not the same as productivity, and productivity is not the same as progress. There is only real progress when there is clarity, and that clarity is built from the very first moment you open your eyes. If you want to stop failing, you don't have to change everything at once. You have to start the day with intention, with direction, with a plan, a simple one, a powerful one that repeats so much that your mind recognizes it as an unbreakable command. And if you're here, it's because something in you is tired of falling into the same cycles, because something inside you knows that you can do more, that you deserve more, that you've been procrastinating out of fear, out of doubt, out of lack of structure. But that can change, not with words, but with actions, with a different morning, one in which you look in the mirror and don't see the same person, one in which, even if the world doesn't notice, you feel something different within yourself. Determination, firmness, powerful silence, that feeling of today, yes, not because everything is resolved, but because this time you won't betray yourself. This time you'll deliver, even if no one sees it, even if there's no applause, even if it's hard, because you are worth it, because you are no longer willing to live another day as if it were a copy of the previous one. And if these words are resonating with you, if something tells you that this is the moment, then subscribe now. Not for the channel, not for the videos, but for yourself, to remind yourself every day that there is a different path, that there is a firmer, clearer, more focused way of living, that there is a place where growth, discipline, and consciousness are honored, that you are not alone, that many of us have decided not to give up, not to procrastinate, not to conform. And every new subscriber here is a symbol, a man who decided to change the way he starts his day, and with it the way he walks through life. Write in the comments, this time, I deliver on my promise to myself, Write it not for me, but for yourself, so that tomorrow when the alarm rings, you remember that promise and keep it. Because that simple phrase can become your code, your compass, your anchor. And if you repeat it enough, your mind will believe it. And when your mind believes, you act. And when you act, you are no longer repeating history. You are writing a new one, with the ink of will, with the letters of character, with pages full of firm decisions. This is how transformation begins, not with a miracle, but with a different morning. What very few understand is that every morning is an opportunity to rewrite yourself. You don't need the calendar to change, or a new month to begin, or Monday to arrive. Every day you open your eyes is a silent invitation from destiny. Will you live like yesterday, or will you build something new? And that construction is not emotional. It's not based on how motivated you feel. It's based on how willing you are to act, even when you don't feel like it. Because if your commitment to yourself depends on your mood, then you're trapped, a prisoner of impulses, hormones, weather, environment. But if your commitment is firm, no matter how you feel, you do what you have to do. You move, you get organized, you sustain yourself, because your word weighs more than your emotion. What separates those who achieve great things from those who always fall short is not intelligence or luck or contacts. It's the invisible discipline. That discipline that no one sees but transforms everything. That discipline that makes you get up early when no one forces you. That leads you to plan your day when you could simply improvise. That makes you read, write, train your mind, set boundaries, breathe before reacting. That makes you strong inside even when there's no applause outside. It's that silent discipline that makes the difference. That hardens you without making you cold. That focuses you without making you rigid. That transforms you because you stop being a slave to your old habits and become the architect of your own identity. But none of that happens if you don't make it a routine, something non-negotiable. You don't need more motivation. You need rituals that remind you who you are, who you want to be, and what you're willing to do. And those rituals begin upon waking, with a deep breath, with a clear affirmation, with a firm action, with a silent decision that says, today I will not fail myself. Repeat that every morning. Write it, read it, feel it, make it your phrase, because the man who doesn't fail himself becomes invincible. You may have bad days, moments of doubt, but you don't stop, you don't disintegrate, you don't get lost, because your direction is stronger than your emotions. And over time, that inner strength begins to reflect outwardly. Your decisions are quicker, your voice firmer, your posture more upright, your presence clearer, because you have built within yourself a structure that sustains you, and that structure was not given by the world. You built it every morning when you chose not to repeat yourself, when you did what you had to do, even when it wasn't easy, when you treated yourself like a man committed to his best version. That is what makes you different. Not perfect, but firm. Not without mistakes, but without excuses. Because what began as a small habit eventually became a new way of living. And that silent but real change changes everything. Most people fail not because they don't have dreams, but because they haven't learned to protect their energy. They start the morning with noble intentions, but as soon as the day begins to pressure them, they forget everything. And it's not because they don't want to move forward, it's because they don't have a strategy to stay focused when the environment pulls at them, when notifications start ringing, when problems appear, when others demand their time, their attention, their mind. And that's where the day slips out of their hands. They don't lose it at 5 p.m., they lose it at 9 a.m., when they allowed external chaos to define their internal course. Therefore, if you want to stop failing, you don't just need a plan, you need to shield your focus, turn it into an unbreakable fortress. Because in a world that competes for your attention every second, focus is no longer an advantage, it's a necessity. The morning is the most sacred time of the day because it hasn't yet been contaminated by others' urgencies. It's a pure, clean, silent space. And if you don't take advantage of it, you lose it. If you don't fill it with direction, noise will fill it. And that noise, however innocent it may seem, takes you away from your goals. Because being distracted today seems harmless, but repeating it every day is what creates a mediocre life. A life where there's always movement, but never progress. Where there's always activity, but never depth. And that's what exhausts you. Not effort, but lack of purpose. Not hard work, but disconnection from your vision. That's why you need to use every morning as a reprogramming. Not symbolically, but practically, strategically. You have to train yourself to return to the center, to filter what enters your mind, to select what you think about, what you focus on, what you empower. Create a ritual that anchors you, that forces you to remember who you are before the world tries to tell you. It can be a written affirmation, a key question, a conscious breath, a powerful visualization. But do it every day, without excuses, without pauses, without interruptions. Because that doesn't just prepare you, it protects you. It protects you from chaos, from anxiety, from confusion, from that feeling of being alive but without direction. And it doesn't need to last an hour. It just needs to be real, to connect you with your vision, to remind you that your time is valuable, that your mind is not for rent, that your energy is not available to just anyone. And if you maintain that focus, if you turn it into discipline, then something starts to change. Distractions no longer have the same power.
Others' urgencies no longer pull you from your center. Your emotions stop controlling you because you have decided that you will not fail due to lack of clarity, that you will not repeat the same old story, that you will not give away your most valuable asset, your attention, to what does not build you. And that change, though it seems invisible at first, is what makes you unstoppable. Because he who masters his focus masters his destiny. The problem isn't failing once. The problem is that by failing, you build an internal story that justifies continued failure. A silent narrative that repeats every morning, even without realizing it. I'm not enough. I always give up. I don't have what it takes. And that voice, which seems like barely a murmur, becomes an internal command. A program that directs your actions, sabotages your decisions, and returns you to the same point, even if you try to move forward. Because no habit is more destructive than the way you talk to yourself, what you tell yourself when you wake up, what you think of yourself when the day has barely begun. That's why, if you want to stop failing, you have to change the story. You have to rewrite the way you perceive yourself. Because you cannot build a new life with a mind that repeats the same old lies. No deep change happens without mental reprogramming. And that reprogramming is not magic. It is not superficial positive thinking. It is strategic repetition. It is conscious affirmation. It is a daily practice of choosing what kind of man you want to be, until that man becomes real, not by blind faith, but by trained conviction. Every morning you have to talk to yourself as if you were already that version. It doesn't matter if you don't feel it yet. It doesn't matter if your environment doesn't reflect it. You train yourself from within, because if your mind believes it, your body follows. And if your body acts, your life transforms. It's that simple, that powerful. It's not about lying to yourself. It's about directing your mind before it drags you into the same pattern. Tell yourself aloud every morning, today I act like a disciplined, strong, determined man, even if you don't feel that way yet. Because by repeating it, by sustaining it, by moving from that energy, your identity begins to change. And identity is the core of everything. You don't act according to what you desire. You act according to what you believe you are. And if every day you remind yourself that you are weak, distracted, and inconsistent, then you will continue to behave that way. But if every day you affirm with clarity who you have decided to be, even before you feel it, then what is an affirmation today will be character tomorrow. The morning is the perfect time to install that new narrative, before doubt interrupts it, before noise contaminates it, when there is still enough silence to listen to yourself truthfully. Do it, write it, repeat it. If necessary, record it and listen to it every day. Because the mind does not distinguish between what is real and what is repeated. It only needs consistency. It only needs direction. And if you don't take it, someone else will. The world will tell you what to think, how to feel, what to fear. But if you anticipate, if you plant your truth first, then everything else loses power, because you have chosen your story. And a man who chooses his story every morning has already started to win, even before getting out of bed. One of the most silent causes of failure is the lack of emotional closure with the past. Because many times you start the day with your body in the present, but your mind is trapped in old mistakes, in decisions you didn't make, in opportunities you let slip away, in words that hurt you, in moments where you failed and haven't forgiven yourself. And so even if you try to focus, even if you have clear goals, you carry an invisible burden that sabotages your progress. Because no one can build the future if every morning they wake up with the guilt of yesterday. That guilt slows you down, that guilt makes you doubt. That guilt makes you start each day with low energy, with your mind divided between what you want to achieve and what you haven't allowed yourself to let go of. You have to understand this. What you don't close, you repeat. What you don't forgive limits you. What you don't face drags you down. That's why a fundamental part of every morning should be to clear the ground, to forgive yourself for what you didn't know how to do, to accept that at that moment you acted with the level of consciousness you had, that if today you would do something different, it's because you've grown, because you've learned, because you are another person. And that's not weakness, that's maturity. A mature man doesn't live justifying his past, but he doesn't stay trapped in it either. He honors it, he learns from it, he transcends it, and by doing so he recovers his energy, recovers his focus, recovers his freedom. Every morning, if you want to be truly powerful, you have to pause, close your eyes, breathe deeply, and tell yourself, today I don't punish myself. Today I use everything I have been to be better. That phrase may sound simple, but said with intention, with consciousness, with an open heart, it cleanses more than 1,000 hours of analysis. Because it gives you back the right to move forward without burden. It reminds you that you are not your mistakes. You are the one who faced them and decided to keep walking with more strength, with more clarity, with more compassion towards yourself. Because the man who treats himself with respect every morning begins the day from strength, not from scarcity. And it's not about forgetting what you've lived, it's about integrating it, using it, saying this happened but it doesn't define me, this hurt but it taught me, this failed but I am not a failure. That is the narrative you need to install. Not because it's pretty, but because it's functional. Because that narrative is what makes you move forward with your chest open, your back straight, your gaze firm. And that, when sustained every morning, changes the way you walk, the way you talk, the way you decide. Because you are no longer running from your past. You are using it as a foundation. And that foundation, clean of guilt, solid in intention, gives you a stability that the world cannot give you. Remember, each new day is a blank page.
Don't bring yesterday's stains. Don't start with old ink. Choose to write something new, something firm, something of your own, something worthy. And for that, the first thing you have to let go of is the idea that you have to keep carrying everything. No, not today. Today you start differently. Today you choose to move forward lightly. And a man who moves forward lightly can go as far as he wants. The biggest mistake the man who fails again and again makes is thinking that changing his life requires changing everything at once. He believes he needs a radical transformation, a miraculous event, a turning point where everything magically reorganizes. But the reality is different. Great transformations don't begin with drastic decisions. They begin with small, sustained commitments, with acts so simple they seem insignificant, but which accumulated every day become unbreakable foundations. You don't fail because you don't have the capacity to change. You fail because you underestimate the power of the small, because you don't believe that waking up 5 minutes earlier, writing 3 phrases in a notebook, choosing a better response to anger, drinking water before coffee can change your life. But it can, and it will, if you repeat it, if you honor it, if you make it part of your new identity. You have to stop romanticizing change as something dramatic. True change makes no noise. It doesn't need epic background music. It is silent. It is repetitive. It is often boring, but that's where the magic hides, in what you do when no one is watching, in what you repeat even when you don't see immediate results, in what you sustain even when you don't feel like it. And to sustain it, you need an internal emotional structure to remind you, a voice within that says this small thing, though it seems like nothing, is everything. Because when you fall, you don't fall due to lack of knowledge. You fall due to lack of a system. And that system is built with micro actions aligned with clear steps, with order. If every morning you wake up and tell yourself that you need to change your whole life, you'll end up exhausted before you even start. But if every morning you tell yourself, today I'm only going to be better at one thing, just one, then you regain power, because you no longer overwhelm yourself, you focus. And that sustained focus, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, makes you invincible. Because you're not competing with the world. You're building yourself from within, step by step, brick by brick, with the patience of someone who doesn't need to prove anything, only to advance. Ask yourself every morning, what can I do today that brings me a little closer to my best version? Not to perfection, not to total success, to your best version. It can be a decision, a conversation, a chosen silence, an excuse you no longer buy anything, but let it be conscious, let it be yours, let it be real. Because when you choose a small daily victory, something within you strengthens. And when that strengthens, failure no longer hurts the same way, because it stops being an end and becomes a teacher. And that's how you win, not with grandiose gestures, but with minimal, daily, firm, and decisive consistency. One day you wake up and realize that everything you dreamed of didn't come by magic. It came because you didn't give up on the small things. And he who doesn't give up on the small things ends up achieving the great things always. And in the end, when all is said and done, when the days have passed and the excuses can no longer be sustained, you will understand a simple but inescapable truth. You didn't fail due to lack of opportunities. You failed by not taking control of yourself every morning. Because every dawn you had the opportunity to change your story, to rewrite your destiny, to walk differently. And you chose to procrastinate. You chose to repeat. You chose to wait. But if you are here today, if you have reached this point, it is because something inside you can no longer tolerate staying the same. Because within you there is a voice that silently screams, enough of the same.
And that voice, when listened to with courage, becomes a guide, a force, a rebirth. You didn't come to survive days. You came to build a life worth living, a life with direction, with character, with power. But that is not given. It is conquered. And it is conquered when you stop negotiating with your excuses, when you commit to your best version, when every morning you wake up with a single question in mind: how can I honor myself today? Because when a man honors himself, when he decides to stop being the result of his past and to become the architect of his present, then the world no longer drags him. He traverses it, he masters it, he transforms it. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. It won't come. You don't need more information, more motivation, more inspiration. What you need is emotional discipline, internal commitment, a morning ritual, and a brutally honest decision. Today I take charge of myself. Because you no longer want to look back with regret, because you are no longer willing to be a passive spectator of your own story, because you know deep down that you are made for more, and that more is not achieved by dreaming, it is achieved by acting. You can have the life you desire, you can regain confidence, you can have clarity, strength, success, fulfillment, but only if you start acting every morning like a man who no longer betrays himself, like a man who doesn't need anyone to push him, like a man who upon opening his eyes tells himself, today I don't fail, today I become the person I came here to be. And when that phrase stops being a desire and becomes your law, then there's no turning back. Because you are no longer the same, because you no longer stop, because now finally you have understood the man who transforms his morning transforms his entire life.